The Raccoon first appeared at the fire station on a Thursday night just after 11, when the town had gone quiet and the men on duty had started settling into the slow hours between calls. At first, nobody thought much of it. Station 4 sat at the edge of Ash Grove, a small river town where the streets emptied early, porch lights burned low, and everyone noticed sirens because there usually weren't many. The firehouse itself was an old brick building with two apparatus bays, a narrow dormitory wing, and a backlot that faced a strip of trees running down toward Miller's Creek. At night, the floodlights over the bay doors cast yellow pools across the concrete apron, and moths battered themselves senseless against the glass until dawn. Firefighter Ben Holloway noticed the Raccoon first. He was rinsing coffee mugs in the station kitchen when he glanced through the side window and saw a small gray-brown shape sitting under the pole light by the engine bay. It wasn't rummaging through trash or creeping around the alley like raccoons usually did. It was just sitting there, upright, watching the building. Ben frowned and wiped his hands on a towel. "Hey!" he called toward the common room. "We've got company." Captain Luis Ortega looked up from the incident reports spread across the table. At 48, Luis had the calm, weathered face of a man who had spent 2 decades walking into other people's emergencies and had learned not to waste energy on small surprises. What kind of company? Trash panda variety. Junior firefighter Nate Rollins, who was 24 and delighted by anything that interrupted paperwork, got up immediately and went to the window. No way. The three of them looked out together. The raccoon was smaller than a full-grown adult, though not a baby. Its fur looked damp and rough, its striped tail dirty from the ground, and one ear had a small notch out of the edge. The dark mask around its eyes gave it the usual bandit look, but there was something odd in the way it held itself. It wasn't scavenging, wasn't afraid, wasn't trying to get into anything. It was staring at the side entrance. "You feeding strays again, Ben?" Nate asked. Ben snorted. "Not unless they've learned to fill out the forms first." Luis walked to the door, opened it a few inches, and made a low shooing sound. "Go on." The raccoon didn't budge. It only looked at him, then turned its head once toward the dark tree line behind the station, then back again. Luis shut the door. "Well, that's new." They laughed about it for a minute because firefighters laugh at things until there's a reason not to. Then tones went off for a vehicle fire on the highway, and by the time the engine came back 2 hours later, the raccoon was gone. The next night it returned. This time it showed up earlier, around 10:30, just as the crew was finishing dinner. Nate was the first to spot it through the bay door windows. "Your friend's back." Ben looked out and saw the same raccoon standing closer now, near the edge of the apron. It wasn't sitting tonight. It paced 3 or 4 steps one way, stopped, looked toward the woods, then came back to the exact same place. Luis folded his arms. "Anybody leave food out?" No one had. The raccoon moved toward the side door as if hearing their voices, then stopped and rose briefly onto its hind legs. It pressed its front paws against the lower kick plate, scratched once, and dropped back down. Nate laughed. "He wants to apply." Luis didn't. Something in his face sharpened. "Open the door." Ben cracked it open. The raccoon sprang backward, but not far. It landed, turned toward the trees again, and made a strange chittering sound low in its throat. Then it took several quick steps into the darkness beyond the floodlight, stopped, and looked back. All 3 men watched. "Okay," Ben said slowly. "That's weird." The raccoon came back to the door, scratched again, and repeated the whole thing. Door, trees, door, trees. "You think it's hurt?" Nate asked. Luis studied the animal. "If it is, it's not asking for food. It wants attention." "From us?" Luis didn't answer. He only shut the door again and said, "Keep an eye on it." The raccoon stayed another 20 minutes. Then the station got called out for a chest pain response across town, and when they returned, it was gone again. By the 3rd night, the animal had become a subject of active discussion. Firehouses are like that. Anything unusual gets folded into the life of the building quickly. Somebody starts a theory, somebody else gives it a nickname, and before long the whole shift is invested whether they admit it or not. Nate started calling the raccoon Smokey Jr. Ben called it a nuisance. Louis said nothing, which usually meant he was thinking harder than the others. When the raccoon arrived that Saturday night, it didn't wait at the pole light. It came straight to the side entrance and scratched so loudly against the metal that the sound carried all the way into the bunk room. Ben, already half annoyed, opened the door more sharply than before. What? The raccoon jumped back, then at once spun toward the trees and ran a few yards into the darkness. Then it stopped, looked back, waited. Louise came up beside him. Get your flashlight. Ben turned to look at him. You're serious? Yeah. Nate was already pulling on his jacket. I'm coming. No, Louise said. You stay with the station. That ended the argument. 5 minutes later, Louise and Ben stepped off the back lot into the narrow service path behind the station. The raccoon was visible ahead only in flashes, eyes reflecting white in the beam, ringed tail slipping through weeds, quick movements at the edge of light. It never let them get too close. It never vanished entirely either. Every time they slowed, it stopped and waited. Beyond the station, the path dropped into a strip of untended land between the creek and the old rail embankment. Tangled brush grew there, wild blackberries, sumac, saplings, storm-fallen branches, and the ground turned soft in places from runoff. The town used to keep the path clear years earlier, but budget cuts and better projects had let it go mostly to itself. Ben swept the flashlight ahead. What exactly are we doing? Luis answered without taking his eyes off the raccoon. Finding out why it came back 3 nights in a row. That's not a reason, that's curiosity. Sometimes curiosity is a reason. They followed the animal down the slope toward Miller's Creek. The water was low that summer, barely more than a dark ribbon sliding over stones between muddy banks. A rusted shopping cart lay half embedded in reeds near the bend. Further down stood the remains of an old footbridge. The town had closed years before after storm damage. Most of the planks were gone. One side rail leaned at an angle and warning signs hung crooked from the posts, ignored by everyone except people old enough to remember why they were there. The raccoon didn't stop at the creek. It crossed along the bank and disappeared into thicker brush near the bridge remains. Luis raised a hand. Listen. At first Ben heard only water and insects, then something else. So faint it almost blended with the creek. A sound like crying. Not an animal. Human. Ben's whole body changed at once. You hear that? Luis was already moving. They crashed through the brush toward the old bridge approach, flashlight beams jerking over broken timber and briars. The crying came again, thin, frightened, and close now, with the breathless, hiccuping rhythm of a child who had been alone too long. Hello, Louis shouted. Fire department! The beam caught movement below. There in the shallow ravine beside the broken bridge footing was a little girl. She could not have been older than 6 or 7. She sat wedged between 2 slabs of collapsed concrete and a tangle of vines, one knee pulled awkwardly up to her chest, face streaked with dirt and tears. Her pink sweatshirt was muddy, one shoe missing, hair stuck to her cheek. When the light hit her, she blinked hard and started crying in earnest. Ben felt his stomach drop. Easy, sweetheart, Louis said at once, voice changing into the tone firefighters keep for children, panic, and hurt animals. You're okay. We've got you. The girl shook her head wildly. I can't get out. The raccoon appeared on the bank above her as if to confirm the scene, then sat down and watched in silence. Ben stared at it for one stunned second before dropping to his knees near the concrete. What's your name? Maya. How long have you been here, Maya? She gulped air. Since dark. Luis looked at Ben, and both men understood the shape of the story instantly. One of the neighborhoods uphill from the creek had been hosting a church picnic that evening in the park. Children running, parents distracted, twilight coming fast. A small girl strays too far, a hidden drop beside a condemned bridge, then darkness. In a town this size, people were probably already searching. Luis keyed his radio. Station 4 to dispatch. We've located a missing juvenile female near Miller's Creek behind the old footbridge. Conscious and responsive. Start EMS and law enforcement. Advise if there's an active search for a child named Maya. The reply came almost at once, tight with surprise. Copy, Station 4. Stand by. Yes, active search in progress for Maya Whitcomb, age 6, missing from Memorial Park approximately 1 hour. Ben's jaw clenched. 1 hour. She had been out here alone in the dark for at least that long, maybe longer. How bad are you hurt? He asked gently. My leg. The flashlight found the problem quickly. Her right ankle was trapped beneath a chunk of broken board and vines, not crushed but twisted badly enough to keep her from climbing free. Scrapes marked both arms. The rest looked like fright, cold, and shock. Luis moved carefully down the slope. Maya, I'm going to come get you, all right? She reached for him instantly. The rescue itself took only a few minutes. Luis stabilized the ankle while Ben lifted away the debris. The girl cried out once when the pressure came off, then threw both arms around Luis's neck so hard he nearly lost balance on the slick concrete. He held her steady and carried her up the bank toward the path while Ben lit the footing for him. At the top, Maya twisted enough to look back down toward the creek. Don't leave him, she said. Ben looked around. Leave who? The raccoon. Luis and Ben both turned. The animal was still there, sitting 3 feet away in the weeds. Maya pointed weakly. He kept coming back. Luis frowned. What do you mean? Through hiccuping breaths and the half-broken logic of a scared child, the story came out in pieces while they waited for the medic unit. Maya had wandered farther from the park than she meant to, following pretty lights she later decided were fireflies. Near the old bridge approach, she slipped down the bank and got stuck. She yelled until her throat hurt. No one came. Then after dark, the raccoon appeared. At first it scared her. It stayed at the edge of the concrete and watched. Then it disappeared. Then it came back. Again and again. He went away and came back and went away and came back, she said, shivering against Luis's jacket. I thought he was being mean. Ben slowly looked toward the fire station through the dark trees, realizing the line between events. The raccoon had not just been wandering, it had been trying to bring them there. The medics arrived with a deputy and a flood of flashlight beams. Minutes later came the girl's mother at a near run, straight down the path despite everyone telling her to slow down. She fell to her knees the moment she saw Maya and cried in the raw, helpless way only parents do when the worst thing they imagine suddenly stops. Everything after that became noise and motion, ankle splint, blankets, questions, radios, the deputy confirming the time and location, the mother repeating thank yous so many times the words lost shape. In the middle of it all, the raccoon slipped away. Ben noticed only because he looked up at the exact right second and caught the glint of its eyes turning toward the brush. Then it vanished into the creek darkness without sound. Back at Station 4, the story spread before they even finished restocking the medical gear. By midnight, dispatch knew. By 1, the police chief knew. By morning, half the town knew some version of it. The headlines came later. Fire Station Raccoon leads crew to missing girl wild animal's strange behavior. Ends search near Miller's Creek. Firefighter follows Raccoon into dark, finds lost child. Luis hated the phrasing and Ben hated the attention, but neither could argue with the core facts. The raccoon had shown up at the fire station every night. The night they followed it, they found Maya Whitcomb trapped by the old bridge. Explanations came, as they always do. The wildlife officer said raccoons are curious, intelligent, and highly aware of distress sounds. A local science teacher said the animal was likely drawn first by the child's cries, then associated the nearby station with people and light, and repeated the behavior that had previously brought a human response. Someone online called it coincidence, someone else called it a miracle. A church bulletin used the phrase, unexpected messenger, which Luis found a little dramatic but not entirely wrong. Ben tried to stay practical. I don't know what it understood. He told a reporter he had failed to avoid outside the station. I just know it kept coming back until somebody paid attention. That became the quote everyone repeated. Maya's ankle turned out to be sprained, not broken. She had bruises, cuts, and a violent dislike of creeks for the next several months, but she recovered. 2 weeks later, her family brought cookies to the station and a crayon drawing folded carefully in half. In the drawing, a raccoon the size of a Labrador stood beside a fire truck wearing what seemed to be a firefighter's helmet. Next to it, in uneven letters, Maya had written, "Thank you for sending him." Nate taped the drawing to the bulletin board in the common room, where it stayed long after newer notices layered around it. And the raccoon? It came back. Not every night, not with the same urgency, but often enough. Sometimes it sat under the pole light and watched the station for a while before slipping off toward the creek. Sometimes Ben found muddy paw prints near the side door in the morning. Once, several months later, Luis spotted it at dawn drinking from a puddle by the apron. When he opened the door, it looked up calmly as if checking that the building was still staffed properly, then trotted away. Nate swore it deserved honorary membership. Luis said if it ever learned to clean the kitchen, they'd consider it. Ben never fed it directly, though he did begin leaving a bowl of water behind the storage shed during hot weeks. He told himself it was for any animal that came through, but nobody at the station believed that. Late that fall, after the first hard frost silvered the back lot, Maya and her mother stopped by again on their way home from school. Maya limped only a little by then, mostly when she was tired. She asked if the raccoon still visited. "Sometimes," Ben said. "Can I see him?" Louise crouched to her level. "He doesn't really make appointments." She considered that, solemn and disappointed. Then she nodded as if this was reasonable for raccoons. Before leaving, she put something on the back fence near the tree line, half of a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in a napkin. Her mother started to apologize, but Ben only smiled faintly and said, "We'll take care of it." That night, just after 11, the raccoon appeared again. It came from the creek side, climbed onto the low retaining wall by the station, and sat in the floodlight as if it knew precisely where the offering had been left. Ben, washing out the coffee pot, saw it first. He called Luis and Nate over without saying why. Together they watched from the window. The raccoon sniffed the sandwich, ate part of it, then paused and looked directly toward the glass. For one long moment it seemed to hold their gaze. Then it picked up the remaining crust, turned and disappeared into the dark beyond the station. Nate let out a slow breath. "You think it was the same one?" Luis answered first. "Yeah." Ben watched the darkness a second longer. "Yeah," he said. "I think it was." Years later, people in Ashgrove still told the story. They told it about the raccoon that kept showing up at the fire station, about the firefighter who finally followed it into the dark, about the little girl found alive beside the old bridge because someone, human or otherwise, refused to let her stay lost. And whenever Ben heard someone turning the story into something too polished or magical, he corrected only one part. "It wasn't like in the movies," he'd say. "The animal didn't bow or wave us along or do anything neat. It just kept coming back, over and over, like it needed us to understand." For him, that was more than enough.